Well, my name is Fernando Martinez, and I'm a graphic designer. I've been doing graphic design for roughly 10 years. If you would be able to see my face, my face, you would notice that I'm not that old, even though I started fairly early with graphic design, and I got a bachelor's degree from Venezuela, from the University of Margarita. Where I first started my professional career. Since then, I've traveled a fair bit and then landed here in Australia about 7 years ago and had the opportunity to first work and then study at Mindroom. And that's the start of a great relationship with this really cool school educational provider, and they're also my friends now. And so that's the reason why we are bringing to you today this talk about how to, or the ins and out about transitioning from graphic design to web design and development. So thanks for everyone who is watching now or will be watching later, and I will leave a comment here with contact details and my name on my profile on Facebook. So if you got any questions or anything you need to share with me, we can do it through Facebook. Yep. Cool. Awesome. So what I'm bringing to you today is just I've broken down the structure into three different parts, and the first one is a bit of an explanation on how it is to transition from graphic design to the web environment, and how can that be approached. Then we will touch base on the challenges and the gaps that we usually find when we are as graphic designers trying to do web. Okay, and lastly, I will be sharing with you a document with curated resources that will help you transitioning from graphic design to web design and development. So it will be a set of tools and just resources that are going to help you along the way if you decide you like to actually take this path. Okay. So without any more delay, right, I would like to start with a bit of a concept here, the concept for front-end developer, okay? Because web design is actually web development and web design is actually a really broad scope of things. It's not only one thing. So, but today, I would like to focus on front-end development, okay? So pretty much that means that it's going to be the person in charge of dealing with everything on the client side, okay? So all what we call the interface, okay? What you actually see on the screen. If you're not familiarized with this sort of thing, with web development, then I can briefly explain that it's pretty much divided in two pieces, okay? The server side, which is everything that happens on the background and how all the data is being retrieved, and the client side, which is, you know, everything that happens and on the front, so everything that we can actually see, okay? So the front-end developer will be dealing with that side of things, and that's probably or most likely to be the role that you'll be playing if you are transitioning from something like graphic design, which is a visual art. If you then decide to turn it into web development, you will probably would be approaching front end development first. Okay, so a front end developer pretty much would be reviewing designs that web designers are doing. So even you guys, if we have any graphic design watching, you might have already designed layouts for a website, but that doesn't really mean you created the whole website. So the front-end developer would be the person taking care of actually assessing what's being designed and turning that into code and making it work in a browser or a web app. Okay, it uses usually code or a mix of different languages, and is also in charge of maintaining everything working. Okay, so everything that you can see working. Okay, everything that is rendering on the screen. Okay, I just wanted to make that clear. So if we get that concept clear, then we will be all understanding the same thing as we go along the way. Obviously, as I said before, the front end developers are not the only role that takes part into web development, and there are a number of different roles and people that do different things, including web designers, which would be the step before the front end developer, and people like the UI designer, which usually takes care of all the visual things actually rendering right and making sure all of the pieces of code and scripts and files are actually working and showing what the way they're supposed to be showing. That within a whole heap of different things, but mostly that. And obviously the UX designers, which would be more concerned about the way that people interact with the websites or apps. Okay, so keep in mind that here we'll be talking about front end development. Okay, from graphic design to front end development. Cool. So the way that we usually go and see web design is as if we were designing for a new support, okay, a new kind of media, as we go along and design things for print or social media, digital flyers, and so on, or maybe large scale supports or things of that nature. Sometimes we tend to think that web development would be something similar. Okay, just adjusting a set of tools and maybe using a different software, but still thinking as graphic designer. Okay, and that's not totally wrong. Okay, there are a lot of links in between development, in between web and graphic design, but I think we will fall short if we think as plain as this. Okay, if we only think we're designing for let's say a digital flyer. Okay, because there are a lot more things to think of and a lot more things to be concerned about if we want our designs to actually work. Okay, but saying that, I found this as a big truth, and it's the fact that even static design, especially print, is also an interface. Okay, So an interface is something that you can that the user can interact with. Okay, something that you can do things with. And believe it or not, even if it sounds a little bit abstract, if you take a piece of paper, if you take a flyer, you it's got some similarities with an interface, because you will also be dragging your attention to different sections of this flyer. You will be actually probably performing movements and approaching the flyer in a certain way. You will be looking at that piece from a certain distance, and you will be reading the information, or capturing the information on that static piece with a certain flow, and that certain flow will have to be determined by the graphic designer in a thoughtful way. So in a way that we can actually make sure it's gonna mean what it needs to mean, and it's gonna pass the information that we need to pass to the final user. In that aspect, I find the strongest link in between graphic design for static, for print, and web. Okay, so that means that you actually will have a good starting point. You will actually be using a set of skills that you already have if you're a graphic designer, and then by gaining other skills and thinking in a slightly different way, turn that into your favor and be able to do web design or development. Okay. Um, but I also like to show you here a bit of a table that I did just to compare the roles of a graphic designer and the web developer. Okay, just as a matter of comparison, you can see that a graphic designer can and will have to understand design principles like color and typography and contrast and balance to be able to achieve a good design product. Okay, at the same time, the front end web developer will have to understand the user behaviors and the technologies that will make possible for that person to render a design that maybe is being done by a graphic designer, but he needs to have that knowledge in order to make it work and actually be able to put it out there for the user to interact with. Okay, and on one hand, you get the graphic designer in creating digital assets and watching consistency along different pieces, even including a web page. And then you get the developer going deeper into how that information will be displayed. What is the code that's going to make possible that information to be displayed, and how are people interacting or users interacting with it? Okay, so you see there are some linking points in between what is being put on the table, but at the same time you start seeing some differences. Okay, and this is where I wanted to get to, is the fact that yes, you can use your skills as a graphic designer to approach web development, and you actually will have some advantages by being able to by being a lot more visual and being visually educated. But that doesn't really mean that all the aspects of web development can be taken by the fact that you're a graphic designer. And sadly, you get that a lot, and you think that because you can use a drag and drop tool, it makes you capable of doing any kind of web without any previous knowledge or learning. But if you approach it that way, I would say it's going to bring you more troubles and unhappiness than success. You can get into you can be digging your own grave. Let's say let's put it that way. So the main thing here is that we actually see a difference. Okay, we acknowledge the similarities in between the two of them, but at the same time we already start noticing there are some differences. Okay, and that takes me to what are those problems, and specifically what are those gaps that we find along the way if we tomorrow decide we want to start making websites. Okay, and this is from the point of view of a graphic designer. Let's remember that. Okay. How would it feel if tomorrow morning you wake up with a new email saying you need to finish a website and you have no knowledge about that? Well, that would be really difficult, and that's the evidence that there are gaps and difficulties found along the way when you are as a graphic designer taking upon web. Okay, and one thing that in my experience I see a lot, and it probably has happened to a lot of graphic designers out there, is that you get a lot of pressure from maybe employers or clients, sometimes, because obviously you want to be desirable for an employer or a client, but at the same time you need to know your limits, and you need to know where to ask for collaboration or even upskill if you actually decide to do it. Because it's really common to experience things like the one on this current slide, is the fact that because you're using a computer and you kind of you click fast and you go along tabs easily, people are expecting you to know everything about what can be done in a computer. Okay, and for the client, sometimes if it looks pretty and it looks like it works, it might be enough, and it might get you out of trouble. But then you get it's also really common to end up with a lot of problems for that, because you actually don't have the necessary knowledge to stay on top of things and actually approach any issues that you are going to find along the way. So that's why you are going as a graphic designer, is fairly likely that you're gonna find yourself a client asking you to do things for a website, either if you don't know how to do it or you do, but you're gonna be accessing websites that haven't been touched in 3 years in WordPress and are deprecated. They do not work, and they've been done by someone that actually has no knowledge, but with a client that has no idea what's been done. And see, there are a lot of bad websites and and problems out there. Web develop they're actually giving a lot more work, difficult work for web developers. The next gap that we find, and I think this would be the one that we first think of, is coding. Okay, I wanted to make a parenthesis here and say you don't really need to know how to code to do web. Okay, there are a number of tools out there, especially pointed for graphic designers, that will allow people to create entire websites without having to ever understand what code is about. Okay, but obviously it depends what you're doing as a web developer, and it depends what's gonna be your role as either as a freelancer or as an employee in a certain industry or company. Okay, but I would like to say this, and I'd like for you I like this to stick in your minds, is the fact that when you get into the universe of web, uh, knowing how to code actually helps a lot. And that doesn't really mean you're gonna be a genius of code on on 10 different coding languages. Uh, but if you have a certain understanding on how is the way of thinking when you are coding, and you understand basic languages like HTML or CSS or JavaScript, it will give you a long step ahead, especially if you need to manage people that will be doing, complex coding tasks for you. Okay, so I would like to say that yes, you don't know, it's okay if you don't know how to code, and you can probably get away with a lot of things, but I encourage people to actually study code and stay on top of trends when it comes to coding, because you are going to be a lot more useful and desirable for employees and clients if you are able to handle, or at least understand, part of the coding aspect of development. Okay, and there are other things other than coding, or specifically knowing a language, to be able to actually land a job as a front end developer, which is what we are talking about here today. Because I don't know if it would be the case for everyone, but to my understanding, well, if you are going to um, put all that time, effort, and possibly also money into learning the skill to be a web developer, you probably would like to make some money out of that. So the final, or not maybe the final, but one of the goals that you're gonna get along the way would be landing a job, or actually being able to freelance and profit from the fact that you know how to develop. Okay, and things like building a portfolio is a big one, and that doesn't, and I know it could be challenging if you are actually transitioning from graphic design into web. At the same time, the same way that you can build a portfolio out of your own case studies and your own briefs, you can actually build a portfolio on web by, at the same time that you are building your skills and you are doing tutorials, or you are joining courses. At the same time, you can build that portfolio, and with graphic design, obviously it will help you making that portfolio a lot more visually appealing. The next thing that I think is really important is to familiarize yourself with the content management systems, which is the second one there along the lines, which on the list, which is the CMS. Okay, so CMS like WordPress, which is the most used one in the web, is actually really useful, because again, you will be able to do a lot more things if you familiarize yourself with a CMS like WordPress. Okay, also frameworks for coding, so CSS being a coding language for styling data and rendering, visually rendering things on the screen. There are some frameworks that actually will make your life a lot easier, and I will be sharing some of these frameworks with you. Once you get the understanding on how the language works, it's a lot easier to also understand the frameworks. Obviously, there is a learning curve depending on the one that you use, but along the time, at the end of the day, it will save you a lot of time and effort, if you know how to deal with these frameworks. Okay, the next thing would be all the universe of hosting and how to manage and host websites, and it could be really complex, and it could also drift into the back end developer, but at the same time, you do need to have some understanding on how things work and how a website or a web app is hosted, and at least being able to know the basics, and if you have any issues, at least know how to approach them. Okay. The next thing, especially if you are focusing on UX or UI, would be the information architecture. So actually studying user behavior and the way that the information will be displayed along a web app or a website. Okay. And then things that, depending on what you do, could be useful or not really, but I find interesting to at least, again, know the basics. Things like SEO, which is a search engine optimization, which is just to find ways for Google to crawl your website and actually be found on the search when you Google certain keywords. And the last thing, which is a bit more specific, and it will probably be a later thing, but it's something that is good to keep in mind. It's just everything regarding to user experience, which is UX, and UI, which is the user interface. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Obviously, this is not a comprehensive list. It's just a number of things that would get you started, and that hopefully can awake a sort of curiosity and get you studying and researching. And lastly, I have a number of resources I wanted to share with you. Okay, so because I'm sharing the screen this way, I'm gonna have to quickly escape here my presentation. I will be sharing the link here in the comments. I will actually do it straight away. So this is a live document. I will paste it here on the comments so you can grab it. I can also create a post on the event and the Mindroom Innovation page. So anyone that like to grab it, you can go and grab it from there. Okay, but the list of resources I'd like to show you are going to be in that document, and it's been split in between things to read and research, from a better understanding on what's the role of a developer to user behavior, and then a list of tutorials that actually helped me transitioning from graphic design to development. And you will find a lot of options online, but it's I've been recommended these ones, and I've tried them, and I'm actually always updating my knowledge with these tools. I will recommend Udemy or Udemy. I don't know exactly what's the pronunciation, but the second one here. And as a first approach, if you are if you are new with coding, go and check Scrimba, especially CSS and HTML, which are the languages that you should start with, as they are pretty much, especially HTML, which is like the base to then develop anything you want. So feel free. Most of these ones are free except for Udemy, but there are some really cheap courses here for less than, I don't know, $30 or so that are really worth it, especially once you've done CSS and HTML. Go and do things like JavaScript. Okay, this one here is actually really good. So the teacher at Mindroom actually recommended this, and I've done it, and it's actually worth it. Okay, and then you will also find some tools here. The once you get more familiarized, with this set of tutorials and things that you're interested on, these tools will get you going. Okay, so these tools are the ongoing tools that you are going to need for once you are, once you start playing along with websites and coding, things like CodePen, where you can get a lot of examples about code in different languages. This hosting company here called Cloudways, it actually offers a cheap way to get you started and host a few websites, and they actually have a 1 month free plan that will allow you to test and see if it works for you, and host a few domains there and start playing around. Some frameworks as well, like these two, Bootstrap, which is I think the most common one, and Bulma, and things like things that will help you getting fonts and types around. You can also research the one from Adobe, which is the one that I use the most, but Google Fonts is the most spread out at the moment. Icons and GitHub, which is a next level tool, but eventually, if you actually get into it, is really used in the world of development, and other options for hosting and content copyright free that will help you with your work as a developer. Okay, I'll quickly switch back to the presentation, and just to finish by saying thanks for the ones that have seen and listened to me today, and I encourage you as well to do a little bit of research on what Mindroom has got to offer in regards to both graphic design and web development. There are a couple of really good courses that you can do there. I'm teaching at the moment graphic design for the students up here in the sunny coast, and I've got an online session as well for the ones in the Gold Coast, the campus at the Gold Coast. And I've studied a diploma in web development with Binance, so I can say firsthand it's been a great experience. It actually got me market ready and industry ready to go and get a job. So and plus all of the activities and things that you can do around with Mindroom are actually really cool. I don't think there are any other schools around Queensland. I don't know if in Australia they do as many things as Mindroom does. Being here in Australia for over 7 years, and I've studied in a number of schools, and and I'm involved with RTOs. I can say the Mindroom is a really good option if you are looking to upskill in things like graphic design, web development, or even project management. They can also be involved at some point with development. Okay, cool. So you've got the handles here, and again, if you got any questions or anything you'd like to share with me, I'll also paste now my profile here, and let's stay in touch. You can reach me through Mindroom as well, and hope you the best. Okay, thank you.